So I wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit about using strings in a recording studio context because you've done a lot
Yeah,
of that. There's a lot of, especially like kind of DIY people that are making music themselves that have a lot of questions when it comes to, well, how do I use strings? Especially because they're kind of popular now. Like they're kind of having a moment with a lot of really big artists using them for the last like 10 years. So
yeah,
a lot of people want to use them, but like they're kind of like a tricky little thing to always sometimes get right in the studio. So I thought
sure.
it'd be nice to kind of go to the source. So um, you get a call to do a session,
hmm
playing with the band. Maybe you played with them before, maybe not. They have some string stuff. They know they want strings. What are like one or two things where when you go into a studio, it's a good. You're like, okay, thumbs up. This is going to go well. Like preparation items or how the studio was run. Like, what do you
Yeah.
think?
Um, Thumbs up, this is going to go well. To me, when I walk in and the mics are already set up,
Okay, yeah,
that's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
whoa,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, Especially if you don't know the person that you're recording with and you're kind of going in blind. Um, so there's a few different ways to, I guess, end up in a studio, right? One of them is you're recording with a band, and so you kind of like black out a few days or however long it takes to record, and you just do that, and you're just recording all day. Um, and so that's one thing where like time is still of the essence, but not as much. And then you get a cold call with someone that you've never met before that wants strings on their project. And if you, so you're like kind of not necessarily watching the clock, it depends on how you worked it out, but like setting up a mic or several mics or however the studio's doing it generally takes some time. So if you go in there and everything's all set up, that's like at least 30 minutes
Like, yeah, like at
off
least the
off the
engineer knows
clock.
what he's doing, right? Like,
Totally, yeah.
yeah.
Or like, yeah, and also like the artist um, also is like on top of it and let their engineer know that like, hey, strings are coming in today, and they're ready for it. They planned for it. At least that much.
When is using notation for a string part something that's necessary, and when is it not?
So obviously it's not as necessary if you want some sort of improvised sound or you want a solo. Um, then you'll still it would still be nice to have like a chart, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least with chord changes, but not as necessary. Or if you're going for a certain style and you hire someone that you know can play in that style, like, hey, I really want a country western sounding sad violin sound on this track. um, then it's not as necessary. It's still nice to have maybe something written, like, I want the violin to hit these pitches during this part, or I want the violin to start low and go high. At least some sort of idea of where you want the violin to go in the track would
Mm-hmm.
be great. Um, Definitely necessary or very, very, very helpful. Saves a lot of time to have notated parts when you have more than one player playing at the same time.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah. So if not, you're gonna spend a lot of time in the studio making sure that your multiple string players aren't accidentally playing the same thing when you ask them to improvise, or they're all thinking of different ideas, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, that would be necessary. Or obviously, if you have like something very specific that you want, I've gone into all sorts of situations where the charts are written. Maybe they've hired an arranger to write string parts, and it goes so fast, and it's exactly what they want. And maybe there's little changes here and there, but everyone leaves happy. And that foresight to have those parts there, it takes a lot of work, but it pays off in the end.
What kind of a situation like how do you make the call? Do I need multiple string players or only one? Like, and how many do you need? Like, is there, like any ideas for any of the songwriters out there? Like, they know they want to use strings, but they don't know what to use. Like,
Sure.
what kind of players would you need? When would you need one player? When would you need an ensemble? What would that ensemble look like?
Well, it depends on what you're going for. I would say, like, if you're a songwriter and you want strings, but you're not quite sure what that specific sound is, maybe start listening to some tracks that you like that have strings in them, and then check out the credits or a YouTube video or whatever it is and try and figure out, is that a cello? Is that a violin? A viola? What is happening there? Are they plucking? Are they bowing? Is there a cello and a violin? And so like start with a sound that you want in your head and then do a little bit of listening research and see if you can figure out what that is. If you want multiple violins or you want some sort of like thick sounding string harmony, but it's kind of in the range of that violin sound, that like mid to high, you could get away with having one player and doing some dubbing. But having like two players and laying down multiple tracks can, well, for one, it can make time go by a lot faster and it sounds a lot more organic when you're doing that. But essentially, as soon as you start layering the same string player over and over and over, it almost can tend to sound, I think, kind of MIDI-y, because you just have the same person with the same vibrato, the same tone, doing layer on layer on layer on layer, and it starts to sound just less organic.
Just kind of like you're copying, pasting the part a little bit.
Yeah,
sort of.
totally.
Yeah. So to get that like ensemble string sound, you do need like an ensemble. So like what would be like a good minimum amount of players to kind of get that sound, like a trio, quartet, something like that?
So you could do a violin cello trio or duo.
Okay.
And maybe have a couple layers of each one. A string quartet sound is a really, really great full sound that a lot of people have written for, because it has that, there's just like some magic about it that makes it really full. You're covering all the ranges there. So if you have the budget to hire a string quartet to come in all on the same day and do those parts, that's pretty amazing. That'll give you some like magical recordings.
And like in my experience, that's kind of worth it, because you're not. It's a little more costly, but you're definitely not saving time. Because if you do like a two players and you have like a cello overdubbing itself and a violin overdubbing itself, it's going to take you all like the same amount of time in the studio to do all those overdubs, as it would to just do like one or two passes with the full group.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like the big news is like the big opening up for Andrew Bird right at the end of this month.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
It's huge. Yeah. So that's with Betsy Gantz's band called the Sun Punchers. Great group from Phoenix. It's been around for a long time. I've done some string sessions on their records, and now I'm a part of the band, permanent member, and we're opening for Andrew Bird and Iron and Wine, which is so crazy. I can't even explain.
Super awesome.
I know Andrew Bird is like, so
it's the real deal. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.